Right. Select the round, PM. Are we good? Yeah. The Nobel Peace Prize is a recognition that you are the epitome of human activism for peace and humanity, and that it is your actions, even though once upon a time recognized as an action that led to peace in a difficult situation within your country, also an expectation that you are the torchbearer of peace within your region. We think Aung San Suu Kyi has failed miserably and has actively resulted in hurt of individuals on the ground. What will I talk about in my speech? Number one, why we think principally she no longer deserves this peace prize and she no longer meets the standards. Secondly, I'll talk about why exactly she doesn't meet those standards and what exactly she has done. We think these are very extensive, and why in this time-sensitive situations, the actions that she is doing is actively harming peace on the ground. Lastly, I'll very clearly tell you what we expect to happen in our world when we take away this Nobel Peace Prize, very clear. So first argument, why do you think she no longer deserves this Peace Prize? Look, like I told you, the Nobel Peace Prize isn't just a recognition that you did something good in the past. The fact that she helped introduce democracy within Myanmar and opposed the military rule and therefore was a martyr in house arrest for like a quarter of her life. It is also a recognition that we expect you to bear this responsibility and focus doing good within your society, which is why people like Malala Yousafzai are not just happy with being shot standing up for education, but dedicate their entire life, or at least the free time that they have, in ensuring this cause is promoted. At the very least, even if you're not doing anything other than the past good action that you did, we expect you not to do things that are antithetical to what you are rewarded for. This is like saying Malala Yousafzai actively going to Islamic countries and saying education is a bane and you should actively push against it. We tell you that because she no longer meets the standards that the Nobel Peace Prize gives to her, she also deserves that. But a second standard that also I would like to say is not just the recognition that we give her, but that Nobel Peace Prize comes with a lot of fame and a lot of recognition. She has literally, because of her Nobel Peace Prize, the international community got her out of jail. Because of her Nobel Peace Prize, she got to speak, she got to write books, she literally got to make money and have the ability to have income when she had no other source of sustainability, when she was under house arrest. Because of the fact that she largely benefited from this Nobel Peace Prize, we think that she's doing actions that are actively hurting what this Peace Prize stands for. So second issue, what exactly has she been doing? What exactly has she been doing? What exactly has she been doing? So first of all, we say so the first thing I'd like to say is she's not just complicit through her silence, she makes active actions that hurt people on the ground. The first thing that she does is, like what Aung is going to say is, look, her hands are tied, right? She has no ability to change what's going on in Myanmar. That's not true. Look, she's the functional leader of the state, even though the military has a lot of power. The second thing I'd also like to say is the military in Myanmar is very scared of Aung San Suu Kyi and the followers that she has. She has followers from decades of rule of her, the influence that her husband had and the influence that her father had, which is why they respected the decision of the first elections that happened in Myanmar, where people swarmed in thousands to vote for her. The military realized that they couldn't go against her without threatening their position in society. This proves to you that she has some leverage against the military, and her ability to stay silent means that she is actively allowing the military to do the bad things that hurt Rohingya community, warning off, shooting them when they are running away, depriving them of basic calories, food, and sanitation that results in this death. Not only does it allow the military to continue their policies, the second thing she does is she actively denies the problem within local media and within international media. Why is this harmful? The thing she does is she refuses to call them Rohingyans, right? She calls them Bangladeshi because she refuses to believe that these are actual citizens of Myanmar. What this does is it feeds into nationalist rhetoric that it is correct that we are treating them this way because they're demanding too much from us. They are not our citizens, therefore they do not fall within our jurisdiction. This not only essentially prompts a lot of policies and military action to respond to this nationalist agenda, what it also does in this time-sensitive issue is actually propagates a lot of hate and a lot of insurgencies within that community. Rebels are uprising because they know that the one person they had to rely on is no longer doing anything for them. What does this mean in the international sphere? I think it has two effects. Number one, a lot of Islamic countries that oftentimes sympathize with their Muslim brothers in Rohingya often feel like the international community isn't doing anything to pressure the one person who they trusted to make changes in Myanmar. What this do is it's an incentive for them to continue actively funneling money into a lot of Rohingya militias that already exist. Saudi Arabia is already doing it. What you incentivize them to do is justify this action because they see that the West is not taking any action. Therefore, we have an incentive to do this, and we are correct in doing this. Secondly, European right-wing parties have an incentive to say, look, we do not have to accept these refugees within our country because oftentimes their own leaders do not recognize them as part of their nation. Therefore, these are things that have to only be dealt with regionally. Therefore, we shouldn't accept them within our country. We think this gives validation to both these international parties that results in more harm to these Rohingya communities. This closing have any POI.
Why do you think that revoking this prize will have the kinds of effects that you think will negate the funding of militias?
Okay, yeah, cool. What happens in our world? Number one, like the basic thing we do is you ensure that Nobel Peace Prize will keep you accountable and responsible, and it creates a precedent to ensure that any future Nobel laureate doesn't do these kinds of actions. That's very important. Secondly, what are the kind of changes that happen in Myanmar? Number one, when she realizes that the West will no longer continue supporting her blindly, she has an incentive to change. Why? A lot of her support isn't just because people love her, like I said earlier on. She's also largely dependent on US trade, EU aid, EU trade, and trade with countries like India. Currently, those countries has no incentive to sanction her or to pressure her to change because the international recognition is still that she is a Nobel Peace Laureate. What happens in our world? When she is afraid that these relations are going to be tarnished, she has an incentive to negotiate. Look, it doesn't have to be negotiations in front of the TV where she creates all the backlash that you're afraid of. Backdoor negotiations with the military, with Buddhist extremists are the least minimum thing that she could do. Secondly, even if she actively goes out on state TV and says to our followers that this atrocity must be condemned, we think even if backlash exists on the long term, you have to prove to me why that long-term backlash negates any efforts that she has in the long run to implement changes. At the end of the day, we think not only do you pressure her as an individual to regain a lot of the recognition that she loses due to our action, but it also pressures countries around her to negotiate, knowing that there is an actor who is willing to negotiate with us and not a person who refuses to acknowledge that these crimes are occurring. For the Rohingya blood and sweat, I am very proud to propose.
Thank you. Next, I'll go.
Could I just check that the stream is off?
Maybe it was never.
I'll just pause. Let me just pause. Or just like turn it around.
So exactly what do we do about the Rohingya people? I still don't understand in their case, right? I think there's a few things we need to establish in this debate. One, what the adequate alternative is in this debate to ensure that Rohingya people are better off. And secondly, their entire case was justified on the premise of a few harms, right, that happened. So long as I can disprove everything they say, further our principle, and tell you why our side is better in catering to the Rohingya, I think it's safe to say we win this debate, right? So there's two things I'm going to prove to you my side. Firstly, I'll tell you exactly why it's justified to take this award away and what impacts this has on Aung San and like the international communities. Secondly, I'll tell you exactly how this impacts the future of Myanmar. All right. So a few things, right? One, they told us that the value of Nobel Peace Prize will be taken away. The point at which you just take it away from everyone, right? Like for example, if Obama, you take it away because of the drone strikes he was conducting, right? Firstly, we already defined who necessarily gets the Nobel Peace Prize, right? It's someone who works for the benefit of humanity. So long as this individual chooses to lead the rest of his life, staying antithetical to the reason why he won that Nobel Peace Prize in the first place, we think it's absolutely okay to take it away. So if it's Obama and we have to take it away from him, we think it's absolutely fine, right? We don't think that an individual can get a Nobel Peace Prize, say, look, like I did something for the benefit of humanity, then just lead the rest of your life doing the exact opposite, right? That's the greater principle behind why the Nobel Peace Prize needs to remain in its purest forms, right? We need to ensure that individuals who win it for a specific reason, and that being they've done something for the best of humanity. And if we're looking up to them, we look up to them for these reasons for the rest of their lives, right? If they live an antithetical life to that, it's very wrong. Secondly, they told us how revoking the Nobel Peace Prize won't help her out a lot, right? There's not much value to it in the end of the day. This is a bit of a contradiction because later on in her speech, she's sort of conceded that Nobel Peace Prize is actually essential to like having foreign relations and things like that, especially when it comes to retaining the identities of certain leaders, right? So I think that we can both, it's very safe to say, especially in the context of Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Peace Prize makes significant impact on her image and the way in which we view her, right? So yeah, a few things. Let me respond to this, right? So first, yeah, sit down. Lastly, she told us that Aung San Suu Kyi is not like very vocal about the kinds of things and the kinds of oppressions that have been happening in the countries, right? Firstly, right? No, this is absolutely flawed. She literally said that she literally called minorities within the Rohingyas Bangladeshis, right? Sit down. This is literally implicating that these individuals are not from your country. But second, right, even if she chooses to stay silent on a lot of these issues, silence doesn't necessarily mean you're against that. Silence can be indicative of many things. For example, silent approval. But secondly, right, your silence just means that you don't want to go against, you don't want to stand in opposition to the kinds of problems that are happening within the country. So we think that when she is vocal, she does actively voice out against them. But secondly, even when she remains silent on such an important issue that is in her country, we think that is definitely not her choosing to do anything productive for them. Sit down, right? But lastly, secondly, what did we say as a response to this? We told you why taking away the Nobel Peace Prize is an important stepping stone in ensuring that the kinds of things change in Myanmar. Sure, this isn't bringing peace immediately, but this is a stepping stone, an important stepping stone. Why? Because one, we take away the kind of leverage Aung San Suu Kyi would otherwise have in like engaging with the international community, right? She can no longer bring up her Nobel Peace Prize and say, I'm a worker for humanity, right? You can't criticize me for the kinds of things that are happening in my country, so on and so forth. I think at the point in which we take away this leverage, she's forced to deal with us at our harshest criticisms, right? What are you doing for your country? Why do you choose to remain silent for your people? Sit down. And she no longer has the excuse of a Nobel Peace Prize to back off most of these things, right? And lastly, just understand that this Nobel Peace Prize is literally many countries coming together to acknowledge that you have done something for the good of humanity. When it's taken away, that's literally the international community saying we no longer show approval for your actions and so on and so forth. But secondly, well, I'll tell you exactly how this impacts the future of Myanmar. Make it quick.
So just to clarify, if the Nobel Peace Prize is really important to Aung San Suu Kyi, what exactly is he mentioning that Aung San Suu Kyi has to achieve in order to keep that Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah. Okay, firstly, don't stay silent on such an important issue. Secondly, make sure that you do something to actively criticize the military in your country, right? So long as she's remained silent for this issue for such a long time, we think that she no longer deserves this Nobel Peace Prize, and it must be revoked in order for us to implement change, right? Like literally their case on like how she's going to voice out, we've literally given her so much of an opportunity. She hasn't done anything to make sure like, you know, people actually get catered to. But secondly, how this impacts the future of Myanmar and things like that. And a bit of a comparative. So they told us that revoking the Nobel Peace Prize won't do a lot of things, right? It won't do anything to like, for example, fight insurgent groups and things like that. I think you need to understand the logic behind what this argument was entailing, right? They completely misrepresented it. When we talk about why, like for example, Saudi Arabia funds certain insurgent groups in these countries, it is literally because of the fact that they see that their Muslim brothers are being oppressed with no alternative, right? The leader of the country is not doing anything to cater to these individuals, which is why they see a legitimate reason to fund these insurgent groups, right? So long as you make sure that the international community remains silent, which by the way they will if like the Nobel Prize isn't revoked, Saudis will continue to see a reason to fund, to actively fund these insurgent groups. How does this change on our side? What is the unique difference we can bring to you? Firstly, right, when you take away this Nobel Peace Prize, she's no longer looked upon as a legitimate like advocate for peace and things like that, right? So this means that other international communities that are like actively engaging in trade with like Myanmar, for example, India, and the United States will have an incentive to back out, right? You don't want to be actively engaged in trade with a nation that has done so many illegitimate things, especially when their leader, who got a Nobel Prize and it was literally taken away from her. You no longer want to be that one country that funds these groups and the military behind this country and things like that, right? So one, we know that, for example, when like America has the incentive to pull out, they can also like cater to like their allies who are funding these rebel groups. Like for example, you can now tell Saudi Arabia to no longer fund these insurgent groups that are committing violent atrocities. This is the like important leverage we have on the outside that can only happen when you change the image of this leader being one that when we show the right image of this leader to show that she is indeed one that doesn't deserve Nobel Peace Prize and is not one that constantly advocates for peace, right? But secondly, they told us that Aung San Suu Kyi will feel alienated in the international community. She will no longer like engage with us and make like productive policies. Firstly, right, that's literally status quo. Aung San Suu Kyi has not been doing, and that's why this motion exists. She hasn't been doing much to ensure that these people actually live better lives. In fact, literally, like, what is the best thing we've gotten from her? If it's not her actively condemning these individuals or calling them not like natives to Myanmar, it's her silence that really hasn't done anything, especially when like people are fleeing the country and landmines are being placed on the border of that country so that these people cannot enter neighboring countries for refuge. That's such a big thing that she's been silent on. She's not been doing much to cater to these individuals, which is why we think that the very notion of like whatever they're trying to present, like she'll feel alienated, make bad policies. This is literally status quo, and that's exactly what we're trying to combat, right? But and then they talked about like the military and its influence. We told you exactly what influence she has over the military. It's literally suicide for the military to go against Aung San Suu Kyi on such on a big scale, right? They're going to have to. Neither one of them are going to actively condemn one another, right? So for all these reasons, we protect the people of Rohingya.
Thank you. Next, Bill.
I actually changed my mind. Could I turn the stream off? It's nothing that I can say that doesn't sound like legitimizing suicide. Genocide.
Madam Chair, before I move on just purely to extension, right, let's deal with this weird dialogue kind of extension that came out where he basically told you that Myanmar as a country was built on a national identity of militant Buddhism based around the structural oppression of Muslims within Burma. Our question is, why is that necessarily a good thing to stand for? I think, for example, a form of national identity that instrumentalizes, systematically oppresses, and commits genocide against Muslim individuals should not be a national identity to stand for. You don't need to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner to say no to that. You need to be a normal, decent human being, right? I think, for example, that national identity is not something we stand for. We're perfectly okay with that. This debate is not about saving the Rohingyas as a whole, because we acknowledge no house can do that. Like Nobel Peace Prize is not amazing in that sense, right? This debate is about evaluating the moral worth of Aung San Suu Kyi. One, why was she awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in the first place in 1991, contrasted to her current actions now, and whether on a scale does she still morally deserve that Peace Prize. That is our extension. We're going to be distinct from OG. So more importantly, right, let's break this deadlock. Is Aung San Suu Kyi influential in Myanmar? There was massive assertion coming in opening house whether or not this is true. And to be fair, I think that none of us can objectively and accurately tell you which is true, right? I think what is likely for us to do is just identify and infer from the actions of the specific stakeholders within Myanmar whether or not she's influential. How do we know that she is? What? She's influential because, as OO considered, she won a massive landslide election with 78% of the popular vote. We can tell that she's influential because the military junta specifically singled her out and said that she is barred under the constitution of Myanmar from running from the office of Prime Minister. We can tell that she's influential because she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. That gives you a massive amount of status in the international community. When you win the Nobel Peace Prize, when you say something, people listen. She has the ability to be heard. She's using that voice. One, she's at best silent at using that voice, or secondly, using that voice to oppress the Rohingya individuals. I think that is morally disgusting. So let's talk about whether or not, here's the extension, whether or not she's moral, whether or not she deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. A bit of more background than what was given in the info slide, or like public service announcement. However, she was given that in 1991 for an act of personal sacrifice, for being one of the longest servers of prisoners of conscience in the status quo. That when she was given the chance to leave Myanmar to attend her husband's funeral in Britain, she refused because she acknowledged that she would never be able to come back to her home country if she did so. So, yeah, that's good. That's heroic. We all agree that that's good, right? What is she doing now? And why is that particularly moral problematic? In the status quo, Aung San Suu Kyi is the state councillor and head of the National League of Democracy, the governing political party within Myanmar. I think that being a government leader automatically entails an obligation to protect each and every single individual within your particular country. She fails that duty, one, by keeping silent. So taking the most charitable opposition case, keeping that kind of silence is a failure of their obligation, because you have a positive duty to protect your particular citizens on the ground from any harm. She's failing that. Secondly, she's actively perpetuating their oppression. One, to O's credit, they talked about how she puts up nationalist sentiments. That's fine and that's good. But most importantly, notice that opening Gav's contribution does not analyze where this morality comes from. The unique contribution from closing government is the understanding that the moral obligation she has comes from the fact that she is an elected leader, and that, for example, she has reaped a lot of personal benefits from that being a personal leader. Notice, for example, that Aung San Suu Kyi's personal expenses is paid by the government of Myanmar. Notice that Aung San Suu Kyi gets to stay in the wing of the presidential palace. Notice that Aung San Suu Kyi gets to be treated with all the pomps and prompting of being a leader of a state country whenever she goes towards international conferences, so on and so forth, right? Insofar as you have reaped advantages from your nation via taking like the taxpayers' money and enriching like yourself in this particular way of form, you have an obligation to protect your people. But let's weigh out, right? Because at the end of the day, we acknowledge she has done some heroic good. Why then do we say that she's systematically morally not worth of the Nobel Peace Prize? One, the scale of the harm that she is causing. Notice that one, Aung San Suu Kyi made a personal sacrifice when was rewarded the Nobel Peace Prize. That is fine because you can consent to that sacrifice as a personal individual. That is different from the status quo where she is a state leader, where there's obligations being currently imposed to you. The level of genocide that's currently, like, I cannot stress this enough. There is literal genocide occurring in Myanmar right now. The scale of the harm is one, massive, and two, she's abdicating a responsibility to protect people who cannot protect themselves. This debate is about the moral worth of Aung San Suu Kyi as a person. She does not have that form of morality anymore. I do not think she deserves that. But sure, even if we accept the best old characterization, so we accept that yes, maybe she's uninfluential, maybe we politically suicide for her to do this. We say you still have to do it anyway. Why? One, the moment that we give you a responsibility as a leader, the moment you take up the mantle of leadership by being a government leader, you ultimately consent to your responsibility to make hard choices. Yes, will it be personally destructive to you? Yes, will it be politically destructive to you? Yes, but so what? You have an obligation to at least try to do something. She has even failed that basic step. Sure.
To be principally consistent, you have to revoke the Nobel Prizes of all the people that have not been ideal, right?
No.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, say that. One, she's not just did not be ideal, she's condoning genocide. So if another person does the same thing, we'll revoke the Nobel Peace Prize then too. Why is that a problem? But lastly, how does help the Rohingya Muslims? Because we need practical impacts in this particular space. So ultimately, Madam Chair, notice that in the status quo, what happens in the Rohingya Muslims is this unique duality. One, they're facing the face of the oppression that's being perpetuated against them is a well-known and beloved figure both domestically and internationally. I think, for example, there's a unique harm towards the Rohingya Muslims because they feel that their suffering as a people are currently being delegitimized. Because when people say that genocide is occurring, the common response is just, why don't you talk to Aung San Suu Kyi, or why aren't your leaders doing so, right? The very fact that the face of the oppression that's being perpetuated against them is this particular leader, magnifies that level of oppression that they currently face. Why is it better on our side? When there's universal revocation of the Nobel Peace Prize, you legitimize the suffering of the Rohingya Muslims. You tell them that the international community recognizes your suffering and that you're not alone. Is this going to cure the genocide? No, it's not. But given the fact that the opening opposition doesn't have a positive case for why this is important, I think that this impact is more than enough to earn this particular take us over there. For all those reasons, we're proud to be voted.
Everyone was quick in this debate to say that Aung San Suu Kyi is a morally disgusting individual who isn't doing anything to fight for the Rohingya Muslims. But I think it's important to recognize how much more responsibility do we attribute to a single individual who just managed to transition to power in the democratic election that just happened in 2011, and the kind of stability that she as an individual faces. I think this also has to be a comparative. So what exactly can she do within that 6 years of power that she is in, versus the ability for her to consolidate even further power from the nationalists on the ground, from the largest Buddhist demographic in those areas, and therefore be able to create sustainable and incremental changes. So I do think, as much as this debate is what closing government wanted to talk about, is what is the moral worth of Aung San Suu Kyi, I'm going to first deal with that and explain to you why it isn't very relevant vis-a-vis and weigh out why the outcome analysis in terms of how we create change for these individuals is far much more important. I'm going to look at 3 things in my speech. Number one, how will this revocation of the Nobel Peace Prize look like, and why exactly was my point of information towards opening government particularly important? Because I question, if the Nobel Peace Prize is particularly important to Aung San Suu Kyi, what is the metric to determine that she has done enough for the country in changing the kind of effects that they want to talk about, right? Secondly, I'm therefore going to do three different types of outcome analysis within this debate. The first outcome that I'm going to talk to you about is in the situation where Aung San Suu Kyi bends to such international pressure and therefore implement the kind of short-term policy changes that are likely to happen. Secondly, what happens when Aung San Suu Kyi now doesn't care that the international community revokes the Nobel Peace Prize award from her, and what are the implications of it? The last outcome analysis I'm therefore going to do is what exactly is the counterfactual when you do allow her to hold on to the Nobel Peace Prize, and why it is particularly important in ensuring that Myanmar constantly remains engaged with the international community, and why that on a comparative is much more important in the way to which we allow for international messaging and signaling to slowly infiltrate Myanmar versus these are antagonist individuals who don't want to relate to the kind of problems they have. No, thank you. Let's look at the first thing then. How will this revocation of the Nobel Peace Prize look like? Notice that revocation is likely to be very visceral and visual, given the biggest upset when it comes to the history of Nobel Peace Prize recipients. What exactly does this mean? So this is how we uniquely contribute coming from closing opposition. The first thing I would like to say is that media agencies are likely to sensationalize the kind of articles that are written about her and are oftentimes rendered to be heavily antagonistic to how Myanmar perceive the problems of the Rohingya conflict. What does this mean? For instance, Aung San Suu Kyi is a murderer of the individuals on the ground and isn't doing anything. What is the problem with all of these kind of analysis? The first thing is, such blanket news reporting that's heavily antagonistic means that it does not take into account the nuance and specificity of the issue on the ground. Second harm, therefore, is that it detracts away attention from how we are best able to resolve the problem on the ground. Rather, it's just some loud, vocal individuals going, oh, Aung San Suu Kyi, please do something. I do think they needed to explain why that loud shouting from the international community is likely to make her cave in and achieve some kind of effects. But the nuance as to why all these harms is particularly important is notice that democratic transition only happened in 2011. That's one. But number two, that the majority demographic within Myanmar is 87.9% Buddhist. What does this mean? Number one, her political influence is extremely weak right now. The analysis coming from OG is like, no, people love her, the military is willing to respect her. The first thing I like to say is that as much as that may be true, no thank you, all of you sit down, is that the remembrance of the military might and the kind of positive effects that he has achieved for them is still very fresh in the minds of these individuals. That is to say, it's extremely easy to topple the balance back to the military individuals vis-a-vis Aung San Suu Kyi itself. This is where OG analysis was contradictory in of itself. They say the military is afraid of Aung San Suu Kyi for two reasons. Number one, her personal connections, which I already rebutted, but number two, the kind of international support that she achieves. But at the same time, the cultivation of change that they wanted, especially in DPN's speech, was that they wanted international actors like India, like the United States, to no longer trade with Aung San Suu Kyi and Myanmar in and of itself. You see why that's contradictory? It is contradictory because if you agree that the reason why the military is afraid of Aung San Suu Kyi is because of the incredible amount of international support she gets, the point where you want international actors to no longer engage with her is when you topple the power dynamics back towards the military, who now knows, Aung San Suu Kyi isn't likely to get help from the international community, even if these instances are likely to happen. No, thank you. But what is the metric to which we determine whether she's doing enough? And this really engages quickly closing government on the moral worth of an individual. Why is it problematic that the affairs of a country gets dictated by the international community? No, thank you. Number one, if you analyze the origins as to why the Rohingya Muslims or the pro-Rohingya Muslims come about, it's due to the kind of colonial influences and imposition of policies within Myanmar itself. So it seems a bit strange that a lot of these problems originated from the colonial masters like the British, who made very clear segregational policy that actively mess over these individuals, but then you have all the moral worth and moral implication to Aung San Suu Kyi as an individual who is able to change her life. I don't think even the moral worth you were able to prove why this is important. But secondly, therefore, outcome analysis. What are the reactions as a result of provoking deep peace? Number one, Aung San Suu Kyi will enter international pressure and change. The problem is that what kind of policies is she going to implement? And this is, I think, the failure of OG to never give us a clear indication as to what these policies were going to look like. If it was going to be short-term policies, why is that few problems? Number one, for her to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and it means that the implementation of the policy has to be extremely rapid and fast. What does this mean? It means that you give a very long time to convince them to stay in the police from New York, that we already exist as a minority. Close. Myanmar, now because no consular, it means it's just a lot more difficult to have the kind of transmission information that we want. But then, whether this is counterfactual when you allow her to hold on to the Nobel Peace Prize? Because number one, you allow for a constant gateway between the international community and Myanmar. This is important because if you don't perceive them as antagonistic, you allow for the transmission of ideas and information to permeate these areas. We could see from closing opposition that this might be slow in the way in which Aung San Suu Kyi consolidate power and create change. But we think if you want the more sustainable form of change, you have to side with the closing opposition.
I think so.
Let's first quickly deal with closing opposition's extension. What they want is that they told us that Aung San Suu Kyi must work within the system. The problematic analysis of their extension was that number one, they never really told us what exactly Aung San Suu Kyi is going to do. Secondly, what exactly you want your world to look like. They just say they have a 5-year plan, but didn't really explain. But even if they assume that Farhan's assumption, they assume that the political influence right now for Aung San Suu Kyi is weak, so therefore there's not much she can do. If that is true, and we accept that closing opposition's premise, how do you want Aung San Suu Kyi to work within the system on your side of the house? If a political influence is so limited to the extent that you can't really do much, we don't really think the policy of working within the system inherently can succeed. Secondly, we told you that we are just about this debate is about revoking the peace prize and the consequences. And if you really want to debate about consequences of revoking the peace prize, this debate is not just for democratically isolating Myanmar. Even if it was right, we told you that there are other individuals within Myanmar who can speak up for the crimes against the Rohingyans, right? We say that Aung San Suu Kyi should not be the one to speak up against these crimes. We think it would be better for her to publicly speak up against the crimes if she can do so. But even if she has little political influence, we think at the very least thing that Aung San Suu Kyi can do is to actively speak out against these abuses, publicly delegitimize the military stance. We think even if this comes at a huge cost of losing support of her, I think it's completely justified because we think no world leader should stand for genocide of citizens within their particular state. The first thing I'm going to look at, right, independent of closing's extension, is whether she's necessarily deserving of the prize. What do we hear from opposing bench as a whole? They told us that Aung San Suu Kyi is not necessarily advocating genocide. All she's doing is staying silent and ignorant. Okay, let's determine the metric for what exactly constitutes genocide. Why this particular person fulfills that metric. At the point in time where you are silent about the plight of the Rohingyas, when you refuse to answer the BBC during an interview, when you allow the military to rape and kill stateless individuals, we think that is justified for us to take away a particular prize that you have, especially at the point in time where your moral worth in 2017 is something that cannot be stood for at that point in time. So this also answers their POI as to what the metrics are in terms of at what point should we take away her prize. Why then is this particularly important? Why is this exclusive to closing government? Opening government talked to you about why you should revoke the prize because as a person, she's particularly terrible. But closing government extends its analysis because we told you that it's not just about her as a person, but it's about her role as a leader of a state. Therefore, we tell you that principally, as long as you are a state leader, you have certain duties and obligations to your citizens to ensure that all of them are protected within the confines of your state. We think it's not simply just for her as an individual, but for also who she represents as a state leader. That is why we think that our premise, that's why we think that opening governments arguments, right, can only stand at the point in time where we accept our premise that Aung San Suu Kyi is a state leader and she has those particular obligations. I think that's the exclusive extension that we brought you and the importance of that extension. We think closing government didn't deal with this, closing opposition didn't deal with this extension either, because the only thing that they said was that Aung San Suu Kyi can't do much. But when you accept that she is a state leader and she has certain ability to use her leverage in terms of reforming the government or in terms of speaking out against abuses, we think she should necessarily do that. The second thing that we heard from opposition, particularly in opening, was that like Aung San Suu Kyi will lose some sort of Karen and Shan support in Thailand, which does this is a politically unstrategic move. We think this debate must be comparative here. On their side, we think that Aung San Suu Kyi must be punished for willing to must be punished if he the trade-off that Aung San Suu Kyi should be making, right, is that we will trade off strained relations from like Karen Shan, like ethnic groups in Thailand, if it means that you are pressured to keep your own citizens, like pressured to protect your own citizens. We think her obligations lie towards protecting the Rohingyans first. After that, she can focus on like her foreign policy and like diplomatic agencies. We think this is perfectly legitimate, and this is the duty that she must accomplish, right? It's not as simple as like protecting other ethnic minorities. Also, if you principally think that protecting like minority relations is particularly important, then we think like you also buy into like CG's analysis that principally as a state leader, she must particularly do these things. Let's then look at the international consequences. Opposition bench assume that you lose some sort of military and international support as a result of doing this. Why is this false? 3 reasons why. Number one, we think opposition do accept to some extent that the military has systematically loosened like their control over like Aung San Suu Kyi, like specifically during the time of which she was a particular leader. Secondly, closing government told you that the international community is actually condemning her and asking for the prize to be revoked. So at the point in time where she actually is revoked, we think there was huge support from the international community, and we think that's inherently a good thing. Therefore, we reject this premise coming out from the whole opposition bench that the international community is going that revoking the prize is going to harm the international community. Instead, we think it creates more positive outcomes in terms of pressuring her to care more about the Rohingyans. Thirdly, even if she loses some form of domestic support, we think that we are okay, because we think for the Rohingyans, and this is another extension that we brought you, this is a symbolic victory. Why then does closing government win this particular clash and this particular debate? We were the first and only team to talk to you about what this revocation actually means for the most vulnerable target group in this particular debate, the Rohingyans. We think this is a symbolic victory for the Rohingyans, because we think at the very least, we think when they realize that the international community has realized, when the international community is caring about their statelessness, and when the international community is no longer allowing the military to legitimize killing and genocide, we think at the very least for the Rohingyas, we think they'll be at least a bit more satisfied. We're not claiming to solve the entire refugee problem or Rohingyan problem, but what we are saying is that as a Rohingyan, we think you'll be partially at least a bit more satisfied, and you will be proud of the fact that the international community is condemning someone who's supposed to protect you as you are a citizen of that particular state. The second thing that I will say, right, is that, okay, but before that, opening, sure.
You offer us sympathy for the Rohingya, some fluffy things, and about the fluffy ideals of the Nobel Peace Prize. We say the trade-off is stability of Myanmar and stability of her regime. How do you weigh that trade-off?
This is a very weird argument coming out of thing, right? They think that stability based on nationalistic rhetoric, which is inherently racist, is a good thing. They never really prove us why they are principally okay with this, and we already dealt with this in closing. We told you at the point in time where your state rhetoric is premised on the fact that you are being racist against a particular group within your state. We think that's a harmful way to construct your state narrative in the first place. That also means at the point in time where her price is not revoked and she allows these abusers to continue, we think the disparity within the Rohingyan Muslims and the other individuals of Myanmar, the Buddhists that they talk about, is going to be extenuated even more so. At the end of the day, let's analyze this debate. Why does CG take the first over all other teams? We told you 2 things, right? We told you why the Peace Prize must be revoked, not just because she's a bad person, as OG explains, as an individual, but also because as a state leader, she has a specific duty and obligation to protect every single citizen who's within that state. Guys, the Rohingyans are not like new immigrants, right? They are individuals who have been living in that particular place of block of land for like decades and decades, right? These are individuals who deserve some form of citizenship. These are individuals who deserve at least a symbolic victory in the sense of revoking the Peace Prize. We think the future outcomes that can come out of this are potentially good as well. We think these are things like, for example, it becomes harder for the military to hide behind saying that Aung San Suu Kyi is okay with genocide, therefore we are doing it. We also think for the Rohingyas, at least they are validated principally because they realize that Aung San Suu Kyi can no longer be seen as a one-dimensional hero. The second reason why we win was because we are the only team that explained why this is particularly important for the people of Rohingya. We think this debate is about what the most vulnerable think, and we think as long as we protect their interests, as long as they principally have a much better perception of individuals, we think we win this debate.
Okay.
timer is not working.
Your mic.
Yes, please. Oh, it works. Shut up, it's the phone that's stupid, not me.
You know you're on stream, right?
So. Recognize that as far as peace is concerned, there's always more than one route to peace. As far as they would like to argue for, all they wanted was a short-term Aung San Suu Kyi speak up for something kind of peace. We think the long-term peace and attainment of any kind of fight or any kind of like achievement for Rohingyas is far more important in the long term, insofar that even if you achieve any kind of short-term benefits, if it doesn't last or if it's not long-lasting, we don't think it really matters at all. I'm going to talk about a few things today. So first of all, I'm going to talk about this whole idea about Nobel Peace Prize and like take OG out of the debate. Then we'll talk about how far we can actually hold Aung San Suu Kyi responsible. Then let's talk about the counterfactual that Farhan wanted to mention. But first of all, right, what the OG wanted to talk about in terms of Nobel Peace Prize? They give us two responses. First of all, the idea of principle of Nobel Peace Prize. Second of all, international pressure. Like that was the outcome that they wanted. Recognize that they had no answer as to what exactly Aung San Suu Kyi needed to do. That was what Farhan already said. They sounded as though they wanted her to entirely solve the problem. You cannot just say that you're gonna ask her to say something, right? Because that's particularly soft. If you think that the Nobel Peace Prize is for you to contribute something to the world, we don't think you can just say Aung San Suu Kyi say something and therefore we let you keep the prize. We think that's just ridiculous and soft on their side. Sit down. More importantly, the outcome of international pressure that they wanted can happen independently of the revocation of Nobel Peace Prize. Anyway, if the international community truly sees a problem, then we think they can very well impose sanctions to status quo. Anyway, the best analysis that we could give to them came out in DPM when he told us things like price is somehow a shield because international community therefore don't want to touch Aung San Suu Kyi. Like, like if you think that it's that influential, we don't think it's that influential insofar that no one really constantly harps on her being a Nobel Peace Prize winner. But more importantly, even if it's true that if you revoke, suddenly like there's extreme reaction from international community to place pressure, then we think that necessarily also means that it's true that the sudden change is going to be entirely antagonistic in nature. This means all the harms that Farhan wanted to bring to you in his analysis comes true. Things like, for example, isolating Myanmar from the international community, all you sit down. Things like, for example, like, you know, Aung San Suu Kyi losing power is a real reality for her, right? And things like, for example, you no longer get the kind of constant change that you wanted to achieve any sort of outcome. But second of all, notice that it's not a warning, I'm going to revoke your peace prize if you don't do this. We think it's a direct action that's going to happen to her at the point in which she doesn't do anything in a rapid amount of time. This means, and that's where we go back to the principle analysis, that first of all, can we really give back the prize to her in the end? We didn't think, no, insofar that, you know, you recognize the value of particular action. Just because you don't do something now, doesn't mean that your action is any less value. We get that to all. But here's an extension. We think the Nobel Peace Prize is now weaponized and politicized. It's particularly bad because Nobel Peace Prize in and of itself is a recognition and a what? Weaponizing it decreases the value insofar that people no longer see it something as they want to strive toward or feel now being a puppet of the international community. We think this particularly hurts any kind of influence the Nobel Peace Prize has. If they wanted to talk about the influence of it in the first place, because now no one really values it, you're just a puppet of the international community. All of you, sit down. So why then do we come up? Why don't we think OG can anyway come above us? First of all, they don't protect the principal legitimacy of peace prize. And furthermore, we already extended from OO, right? So that's a unique contribution. Anyway, it was come above them. But more importantly, the idea of international pressure is like a unique benefit. But second, wasn't insofar that like Aung San Suu Kyi's presence and position in Myanmar is dependent upon her international influence. At the point where she loses the international influence, this also means she loses her position. The genocide still continues. Analysis that Farhan already talked about. No, thank you. Let's talk about how far we can hold Aung San Suu Kyi responsible, because evaluation of responsibility always is dependent on a person's context. First of all, the idea of how this conflict came about, right? The roots are in colonialism. This means it's unfair, principally, to push all the blame upon Aung San Suu Kyi and expect her to solve the problem in status quo. But second, can she actually do anything about it? Like, hello, you think it's magic, is it? Sometimes she says something and solves the problem. We don't think that that's true. She's a one-man show, like what do you expect? The thing we heard coming out from closing was that she's a state leader, all of you sit down, and somehow she has leverage. Like, hello, sure, she has leverage. That's dependent on two things, right? First of all, continued military support. We don't think that happens at the point when she loses international support. But second of all, it's also dependent on the Buddhism, like the people that in Myanmar supporting her. This means that even though she won by a landslide victory, that's dependent upon her, you know, supporting their views and the Burmese people believing that they support, like protects their interests. At the point in which she openly speaks up, no, thank you. Like at the point in which she deviates from that and speaks up for Rohingyas, it's seen as against Buddhists and against Burmese. Why? Because things like land resources are all shared. It's it's likely then they're going to stop supporting her. This means if she loses A, international support, but B, domestic support, she's going to lose her position, like therefore we don't think that that's something that's okay. Don't let Subra lie, that's more important. He told us it's really not important if she loses some kind of domestic support. It's not true. Why? You need the kind of domestic support to ensure that Myanmar continues remaining engaged internationally. You also need the kind of support to ensure that you don't revert to military rule. You also need the kind of support to ensure that democracy and all its benefits they wanted to talk about still exist. Closing.
Do you think that every world leader has the basic obligation to at least try to stop genocide that occurs in their world?
Look, you have a duty to try, but you have to ensure that the duty to try doesn't come at the expense of any kind of other long-term benefit and your position to ensure any kind of outcome that you wanted. No, thank you. Let's talk about the counterfactual then, right? First of all, we think holding on to the Nobel Peace Prize means you allow not only allow for constant engagement between Myanmar and the international community. Farhan talked about the transmission of information into these areas, for example, and what is particularly important. Here's a comparative. If Myanmar feels antagonized, this means you remove such news proliferation. This means, for example, I don't know what he's writing, of Erdogan in Turkey clamps down on national news. This also means that at the point in which you antagonize Myanmar, you isolate them from the international community. This also means all the kind of information transmission and proliferation that you want is not going to happen. I already compared long cross, come on. Second of all, we think it's also important that Aung San Suu Kyi is able to work within the system. Why? Slowly building up power and implementing sustainable changes is particularly important in persuading the kind of root change and fundamental change that exists within the Burmese community. You need the people on the ground to actually accept the Rohingyas before any kind of change and legitimacy can come for their citizenship in the first place. But more importantly, Subra told us that at least her voice can call out on such issues. That comes at the loss of losing power. We think the trade-off is far too much for you to accept any kind of potential benefit that they haven't proven. Anyway, but then we talked about Rohingyas, seeing her speak out as a symbolic victory. A symbolic victory does nothing if your life is at stake. Even if, Aung San Suu Kyi speaks out and the Rohingyas see it as a symbolic victory, if their lives don't change, if the Burmese people still don't respect them and see them as citizens, if they still lose their lives in the conflict, we don't think there's any kind of sustainable and substantial benefit upon the Rohingyas anyway. For all these reasons, I'm extremely proud to stand uniquely in closing opposition.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.